Welcome back to the channel. This game features the last round of the Oakham Young Masters. Nigel's opponent was Krill Georgiev, a Bulgarian international master who was actually the world junior chess champion in 1983. The game started as a Sicilian defence and went into quite a long line of the dragon variation. Black castles and white prepares the castle queenside. And the standard kingside push against the dragon. Portray the knights in the centre, and the queen comes out to pressure the a pawn. And black positions his rook on the open c-file. And Nigel decides to continue with the kingside pawn storm. So it's going to be a classic dragon race. Here black decides to keep on the a1 h8 diagonal. Maybe king to f8 might have been slightly better. And then Nigel offers lots of trades in the centre. And here black makes his first mistake. Taking that pawn actually loses material, as we will see, as bishop takes h8 and unleashes a discovered attack against the d5 bishop, which eventually has to give itself up for 2 pawns, or 3 pawns actually. It's quite a curious position. White has an extra bishop, but black has 3 extra pawns. It's quite a lopsided endgame. The engine prefers white quite substantially, but there's certainly some play left in the game. The rook and white attacks the b pawn. Black could defend the b pawn, but in the long run he's going to end up losing it. So he decides to try and get his king out of the corner, as it was looking a little trapped. And here Nigel decides to take with the bishop. I think rook takes b5 would have been better. Something along the lines of this, which would have been quite nice for white. Although he still has to be careful, there's the passed f pawn and the passed g pawn. But he decides to take with the bishop, which looks a bit cumbersome. And that's going to lead to more trades. Still a very interesting endgame, where black is going to push these pawns. It's whether white can blockade them or not. So takes the d pawn and defended. And white tries to expand on the queen side, but these pawns are rolling. White decides to centralise his king, get himself over there. The engine likes bishop to a6, but I'm not entirely sure why that's such a good move. So the g pawn keeps going, and the king centralises, and the engine gives is actually dead equal. Whereas if I was white, I think I'd be a bit scared still. You need to set up a blockade. But black makes a mistake in pushing the f pawn and allowing the bishop to get to d5, where it can get onto the h8, the h1 a8 diagonal to help the blockade. I think if you'd have played e4 instead of f4, blocking the diagonal would have been a better option. There's something along the lines of this. And to be honest, I don't think white's got any more than a perpetual, not perpetual check, but a check every time the king comes forward. The rook can kick it away. But it's an interesting position. I think black would have drawn the game quite comfortably if he'd have played e4. But he plays f4, which allows bishop to d5, which gets onto this diagonal. The king comes forward to try and help push the pawns. Now he plays e4, which seems to move too late. Maybe rook to f8, getting the rook behind the pawns would have been a better option. So white kicks the king away. And here Nigel plays rook to h5, which actually does allow black to draw the game. It's actually missed by Georgiev. He plays king to g6, which is quite a natural move to threaten the rook and threaten the and eventually win the h pawn. But a very clever idea was d5 in this position, and the idea is that obviously it can be taken when bishop takes d6, but now the rook can get onto the e file and protect the e pawn. And now king to g6 can kick the rook away, and this is actually an equal position. Hard move to find, and not surprised it's not immediately obvious, but a miss nonetheless. So black decides to kick the rook, which obviously hits the a pawn, but obviously now the black loses one of his central pass pawns, and this is actually the winning maneuver for white because he can set up a blockade against these pawns now. Hits the d pawn, which has to be defended, and white can gradually start moving the queenside pawns. And here's the blockade with the bishop on g2. Just moving his king away from a rook e3 check. And here comes the queenside pawns, which become dangerous themselves. A nice move just to keep the pawns rolling and keeping the black rook occupied. Obviously, he doesn't want to move off the e file as at the moment it's cutting off the king. But there goes the h pawn. I think king to g6 here would have been a bad move, as rook to c5 gets behind the c pawn, and black will have to put the rook on c7, and this is a horrible position for him because eventually the rook's going to get around to either d7 or b7 and the game's won. So he has to give up the h pawn, but this is lost for black now because the c pawn's a massive threat, and the black pawns on the king side are going nowhere. The king comes over to eventually plant itself on f3. Check for the rook, pushing the king further back. And here comes the king to f3 to completely block the position. Black has to defend the f pawn. Small manoeuvring. But black's actually going to run out of moves, being the rook's run sooner rather than later. If he moves the king back or to a6, he's going to end up losing the a pawn. The rook's defending the f pawn, and white's just going to slowly squeeze the position and just win the kingside pawns, and the c pawns are always a massive threat. So in this position, black resigned. Then after there was not much they could do. So Nigel finished on 6 out of 9, which wasn't a bad position. I think it was tied sort of second. I think the winner got 6.5 or 7. Not a bad tournament, but he was still searching for the elusive third GM norm. So I'll pick up the next tournament he played in the next video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, bye.